Okay, so what we're diving into today is a story about how a nation was literally born from fire. It's this wild tale of rebellion, revolution, and reformation. We're going to see how a massive union of three kingdoms just shattered, and how from those ashes, modern Sweden was forged. Let's get into it. So, picture this. For more than 100 years, the big Nordic countries were all locked together in this union. It was supposed to mean strength, but what it really delivered was just chaos. It was this endless cycle of resentment, rebellion, and, let's be honest, Danish dominance. So, the big question we're asking today is what, or maybe who, finally broke that cycle for good? All right, to figure that out, we've got to go back to the beginning, to this huge political experiment that was at the heart of everything. It was called the Kalmar Union. And, by the early 1500s, the whole thing was starting to crack under the pressure. And look, on paper, the Kalmar Union was a brilliant idea. Seriously, it got started way back in 1397, and it brought Sweden, Denmark, and Norway together under one king. The goal was to create this Nordic superpower, right? Strong enough to push back against powerful German trading leagues. And the deal was, each country gets to keep its own laws, its own identity. They just share a king. Simple. What could possibly go wrong? Well, everything, apparently. In reality, it was like a roommate agreement that just went completely off the rails. The idea was all about cooperation, but the reality was Danish dominance. Denmark was pretty much the senior partner in the whole arrangement, and Sweden felt more and more like it was getting the short end of the stick. And that, of course, just led to nonstop resentment and conflict. And right at the center of all this tension, you have the Union King. This person was supposed to be the great unifier, right? The big figurehead for all three kingdoms. But here's the catch. More often than not, the king was Danish, and everyone felt like he was putting Danish interests first. So the one job that was designed to hold everything together actually became the fault line that would eventually tear it all apart. Kind of ironic, huh? So all this constant back and forth, this push and pull, it created this huge power vacuum in Sweden. I mean, the question of who was really in charge. Was it the Danish-backed Union King, or was it some local Swedish leader? That question was always up for grabs, and that led to a really fierce battle for control. Okay, a big part of the problem here was Sweden's own political system. It was called a Valreich, which is basically an elective monarchy. What that means is the king wasn't born into the job. Nope, he was elected by the most powerful nobles. Now, you can just imagine the kind of chaos and shady backroom deals that encouraged, right? It was a total recipe for nonstop power struggles. So yeah, this elective system gave a ton of power to the nobility, but it also just plunged the country into total instability. The alternative was something called an arvreich, a hereditary monarchy, where the crown just gets passed down through the family. That promised something Sweden desperately needed: predictability, stability. It would keep power with the crown instead of having it scattered all over the place among a bunch of ambitious nobles. So in this absolute mess of a system, you've got three main players constantly fighting for control. The Union King, way off in the distance, the super powerful Swedish nobility, and this really interesting, unique Swedish role known as the regent. The regent, or riksföreståndare, was basically the guy in charge of Sweden whenever there wasn't a king on the throne, which, let me tell you, was pretty often. Guys like Sten Sture the Elder, they became these huge symbols of Swedish independence. They were the ones leading the resistance against the Union King, acting like the protector of the nation. And then, of course, you have the Adel, the nobility. These were the guys who owned the land, commanded the armies. Let's be real, they were the true kingmakers. Nobody, and I mean nobody, could rule Sweden without their support. That made them incredibly powerful, and also, not always the most reliable friends to have. All right, so into this messy, unstable, totally chaotic world steps our main character, a young nobleman named Gustav Vasa. And this guy, he doesn't just want to play the game and win. Oh no. He wants to flip the entire board over and just create a whole new set of rules. And his plan? It was a massive, massive gamble. So what was his big move? He decided to harness the power of this huge religious revolution that was sweeping across Europe, the Reformation. This was a movement that was challenging the incredible wealth and power of the Catholic Church. And for Gustav Vasa, this wasn't just a religious thing. For him, it was a golden opportunity, politically and economically. His strategy was brilliant and pretty ruthless. It was basically a four-step plan. Step 1, break up with the Pope in Rome. Done. Step 2, seize all of the church's land, its gold, its silver. We're talking a staggering amount of wealth here. Step 3, create a brand new Swedish church that he, the king, controlled. And finally, step 4, use all that new cash to pay off the kingdom's massive debts and build a powerful modern state. I mean, think about it. By making Sweden a Protestant nation, Gustav Vasa did something truly revolutionary. He took centuries of power and wealth that had been built up by the church and transferred it directly to the crown, to himself. Suddenly, the state, not the church, was the ultimate authority in the kingdom. That's a game changer. But, you can't just tear up the rulebook and remake a country overnight without some serious consequences. These huge political and religious changes, they came at a very real, very human cost. And that cost, well, it led to open rebellion. So what was the problem? It all came down to cash. Even after grabbing all the church's assets, the new Swedish state was still broke, deeply in debt. Gustav Vasa needed money, and he needed it fast. He had to pay the soldiers and the merchants who had helped him get the crown in the first place. The thing is, raiding the big cathedrals just wasn't enough to cover all the debts, so he had to look somewhere else. He looked to the hundreds and hundreds of small parish churches scattered all across the country. And his eyes landed on a symbol that was at the very heart of every single one of those communities. He ordered that every single church had to give up one of its bells, just one, to be confiscated, melted down into metal, and used to pay the state's debts. This is what sparked the Clock Uproaret, the Bell Rebellion. See, to the common people, these bells weren't just big chunks of metal. They were sacred. They called you to worship, they warned you about a fire, they marked births and deaths. They were literally the heartbeat of the village. And so the people fought back. Taking their bells was just a step too far. It felt like an attack on their faith, on their very communities. But this was a new kind of kingdom with a new kind of king. The rebellion was crushed, brutally. Its leaders were executed. Yeah, nation building was a bloody business. Okay, so now he has secured his power, both with money and with military force. Gustav Vasa makes one last, absolutely crucial move to make sure that the chaos of the old system could never, ever come back. He set out to forge a completely new kind of monarchy. He formally abolished the elective monarchy, just got rid of it. No longer would the nobles get to pick and choose the king. Instead, he established that arvrik we talked about, a hereditary monarchy. This made sure that the crown would pass directly to his son. With that one single act, he secured his family's dynasty and ended the nobility's game of playing kingmaker for good. So by swapping out that chaotic, unstable elective system for a predictable, hereditary one, Gustav Vasa laid the foundation for everything that came next, a stable, independent, and modern Swedish state. He had finally broken the cycle. So today, Gustav Vasa is remembered as the father of modern Sweden. But his story leaves us with a pretty tough question, doesn't it? He absolutely built a nation, but to do it, he had to shatter traditions, seize incredible amounts of wealth, and brutally crush anyone who stood in his way. Which kind of makes you wonder, to build something new, do you first have to break what was there before?